Afternoon, my name is Ian Soars. I'm Chief Executive of Spurgeons, which is a charity that works with children and families. And one of the things that we focus a lot on is mental health, particularly looking and working with children. We have a lot of counsellors working in schools across England. But as part of that, we actually have a website that you're all hopefully familiar with, Dadinfo, where we actually talk to dads, have real conversations about real things, like how to start a fire in the woods without matches, stuff that maybe we all think is important, and how to have fun, and what's the purpose of being dad. And today, I'm delighted to be joined by three dads walking, and it's a sensitive subject, which I'm going to ask them to introduce in a moment or two. But the reality is that this does actually impact many dads' lives, many children's lives. And this is the work that, if you like, Figgins and Spurgeons do in our day job. But we wanted to hear, if you like, from the front line of three quite amazing and impressive men who are really focusing on a particular issue. So, Andy, Mike, Tim, welcome.
Hiya.
All right.
And I've got some questions lined up for you guys. But first, could you just tell me a bit about Three Dads Walking and what prompted your charity run-facing efforts and your awareness of the issues facing kids and teenagers today?
Who's going to start?
I'm going to pick on Andy. Is that okay?
You started, Andy.
Andy, you start.
Well, the reason that we all came together was that we all lost our daughters to suicide. We lost Sophie just before Christmas 2018. She was a nurse up in Edinburgh, and I mean, going through a bit of a hard time, was a bit down, but we didn't realise she was suicidal. And so a suicide came out of the blue, and it kind of launched us. Your life changes completely, immediately. Everything you took for granted has gone, and you start afresh almost. But right from the moment we lost Soph, we decided as a family that we had to do something positive to try and help other people. We didn't know what, but when looking for charity support at Soph's funeral, we came across Papyrus, suicide prevention charity, and that just fired me and our family down the suicide prevention route. So that was me launched into this world 3 years ago.
Before we go on to how you met, because that's yeah. So this is obviously it's a huge and deeply personal issue and circumstance that you're in, but actually a lot of dads are in right now. Some of them may be listening. So Tim, if you were, do you want to tell us a bit about your story and then maybe start to share how that impacted you as a dad as well?
Yeah, so it was March 2020. So I'm 14 months behind Andy and his family. It was March 2020, just at the start of lockdown. And my daughter Emily, she was 19. She'd had a series of kind of issues through her life, but she'd had a late diagnosis of autism when she was 16, and that had really helped her. And she'd start to kind of recognise that she was different to other people. We recognised that, and she was going in the right direction. She got a job, she drove, she loved going to the gym. And then at the start of lockdown, just before the Prime Minister announced lockdown, we started to get COVID, or we thought it was COVID in the house. It turned out it wasn't. It was just a common cold. But Em couldn't cope with those restrictions, and she got very stressed about it and ended up taking her life the week before the Prime Minister. We went into lockdown as a nation. And that is, as the other two will tell you, and many other dads and families will say, is the most devastating thing that can happen. Or at the time, that way, I don't know how you beat it. It was horrendous. And we're trying to live with, you've just lost your daughter, the guilt, the anger, the pain of losing your daughter at the very start of lockdown, and then not having the support as well of all your family and friends, because no one could come and see you. For example, Emily's funeral was attended by 6 people in total, which is just wrong for a 19-year-old girl. And it was at the end of just after a funeral that Em's mom, my wife, said, no one will remember Emily in a year's time. And then a few weeks later, we found her note, a suicide note, basically. And in that, she said she said lots of things, but the two very, very articulate two things. First is don't be ashamed of what I've done. And secondly, if others can learn from this, then let them. So with that all in hand, it was just like, we've got to do something positive out of this tremendous disaster. And I didn't know what it was, hadn't got a clue what it was, but I knew I needed to do something positive, because for Em's sake, and for my sake as well, and for my family's sake. So that was my background.
It's I could, forgive me for being intrusive, Tim, but I can see on the wall behind you that if I recognise it correctly, that's the painting that's actually off the website that Em did. Is that right?
Yeah, she did that as a GCSE art piece. She was a really talented artist. Couldn't see it, silly girl, but she was a really talented artist. So yeah, that's in my room at home. So that's her behind me.
Mike, what about you? What's your story?
Well, Bethy was the youngest of the three. We lost Bethy about 5 days after Tim lost Emily. Bethy was, say, 17. She was a very talented vocal artist. She was training to be a vocal artist. She was doing tremendously well with her gigs. She was very popular. She was very outgoing. But I do believe that looking back, and hindsight gives you this ability to look back and see things. I think she had a period where she was falling into poor mental health. That was, maybe we didn't see it as a family, maybe as we should have done. When we look back now at her behaviour and her language, we should maybe have picked up on these things. But I think she was falling into a period of poor mental health, eccentric behaviour. But I think, like Tim with Emily, lockdown, and we lost Beth in the first week of lockdown. I think lockdown was too much for her. She saw all her coping mechanisms, as in her gigs, her friends, going out, being sociable and whatever, all taken away from her. And I think all of a sudden she became isolated. I mean, it hurts terribly. I mean, myself as a father, to think that she felt isolated in her own house with her own family. And as Tim and Andy have said, you're plunged into a surreal world. Things are familiar, but everything is totally different. And everything you see yourself as a father has changed. You know, your pride. You spend everything you can. You put every effort into protecting your children, educating them, warning them, picking them up, taking them to martial arts, stranger danger, crossing the road and everything. But in the end, you can't protect them from their own minds, their own poor mental health, and it is an absolutely devastating blow. But when you don't get over the initial shock, but I think personally myself, I needed to understand a bit more. I need to do, as Tim and Andy have said, you need to do something positive to move forward with this sort of thing. And obviously the walk and Papyrus especially being a preventative charity, that was the way forward for me, a way to move with it.
So, Andy, I know you met via Papyrus, but I didn't quite get the connection about how, because you obviously don't live anywhere near each other. We'll come on to that in a minute.
I think that was the point.
Thank God.
So how did you actually, because I'm not trying to second guess, the answer here, but I'm not huge on social media, so, if you ask me for my Snapchat, so how did three middle-aged men actually meet? So yes, there's a website, yes, there's an organization. How did that work?
Should I say something about Run for Sophie first?
Yeah, sure.
After Soph's death, obviously it was right before Christmas. They actually found a body on December the 22nd, so it was a fairly not good timing. But we decided almost immediately that we weren't going to cancel Christmas. We had to do that and get on and carry on living. And through Christmas and New Year, we were trying to work out what to do. We were introduced to Papyrus by a friend of mine as a charity support at Soph's funeral. So that's got that started down that route. But then Soph had been due to run a half marathon at the end of February, and she'd been trying to get me to run it with her, and I was ignoring her because I hate half marathons. But you're
so built for it. I don't understand.
Absolutely. Careful, lads. Careful. And but Soph's training mate Laura was still going to run it, and so I thought, well, we've got to go and support her. It was across at Bamburgh, across on the northeast coast. Then I thought, we can't just do that. I will run it. And I tried to enter it, the half marathon, but it was full. So I ended up contacting the organisers and ended up running on using Sophie's entry. And now my background, sales and marketing, I just thought, my God, this is a good story, a good human interest story. I'm sure we can use that. So I ended up doing a training video, effectively. We put a video out every day under a Run for Sophie hashtag, which went all over the place, and we got on the news in this part of the world, all the printed media, lots of social media stuff, and on the TV. So for a few months, I was actually quite high profile at the start of 2019 with various things I did off the back of that. So I kind of set off down a money raising route for Papyrus then, and it allowed Mike to fall over me later on.
So if I go kind of next, so obviously we lost Em just a bit ahead of Mike losing Beth, and living this far away from Andy, never heard of him. And it was my daughter that saw both Beth and Em were on social media in terms of their deaths were on social media, and they were in the newspapers. And it was my eldest daughter that, through the wonders of social media, somehow reached out to Mike's daughter. And they started talking, and my eldest daughter, well, I think Mike took the phone off his daughter. Who's this strange person contacting you? And anyhow, my eldest daughter ended up talking to Mike. And this was not very long after, both Emily and Beth had died. So, literally 2-3 weeks, it wasn't very long. And that's when Mike and I started to communicate first by text. And we were two dads in a very, very similar situation with two girls of similar ages. Emily was a little bit older. And that was the start of myself and Mike getting together and texting each other, and very quickly into conversations over the phone.
And did you connect in just because?
No,
these
people were completely unknown to me.
Yes, yeah.
So they were helping each other through that initial kind of trying to recover from the devastation that you had.
Myself and Tim were very much in the same place. You're plunged into a pit, really, of complex grief, and you feel very alone. You're surrounded by family, you're surrounded by friends, but to have someone in the same place, it's so important. We shared things straight away, didn't we? We were, we were brutally honest with each other. Total strangers. I didn't even know what Tim looked like for I don't know, probably about a year.
That's more like it. That's
and it was a shock when I found out. but we very much, you're plunged into this pit of complex grief, and I've been quite open with the lads. Suicide was very much on my mind as well, and I'd never been suicidal before, and it was purely because of the absolute devastation of losing Beth. And a few things keep you going. One was talking to Tim, one was a few support workers, some counselling, and bits and pieces. Family, they're very important just to keep you waking up and carrying on every day. I'll even include the dog Monty in that, but
he doesn't like us.
No, he doesn't. No, he will warm to you. But we started talking. We talked every week, every couple of weeks, didn't we?
Yeah.
And constantly, and it was so important. And this is one thing we found out about when we walked as well, that a lot of people have not been able to find a support mechanism around them. They feel very alone and very, very lonely. So that's how it started. So I obviously started talking to Tim. We loosely started to discuss a walk, didn't we?
Yeah, about August, September afterwards, didn't we?
That was right.
About 5 months in, 6 months in.
Yeah. I'd started doing quite a few courses with Papyrus, prevention of young suicide, as in suicide awareness and suicide prevention courses with them. And I'd started to hear of this guy called Andy Airy, who was very active with his Run for Sophie and The Other Side film, whatever, very proactive. I heard his story and the cogs started working. And I thought, obviously, it's a fair old walk from Manchester, where I live, to where Tim lives in Norfolk. But then I thought, where does Andy live? And then obviously I heard that he spends most of his time actually outdoors. I think he actually lives in a field. But
just about.
You'd be happy living in a field.
As long as people could bring me beer, that'd be fine.
That's it. But I met Andy's son Gregor on one of the courses and started talking to Gregor. And I said, do you think your dad would be interested? And he basically said yes. So I contacted Andy shortly after and went up to the lakes for a walk with him. And first of all, we had a good heart to heart, and then I brought a roughly drawn AA route atlas 2009, and I'd drawn a few lines on it. And Andy, being a sort of an OS map connoisseur, laughed at it and just said yes. So that's how we met.
There's a couple of things that you three are talking about as though it's normal, but I think it's just worth opening up a bit. One is friendship. So I'm 52. I get to about 45. I've worked, I don't know how many hours a week all my life. And the friends I've got, I've had for like 20 or 30 years. But, very gently, life's taken a toll. I've lost a couple, to ill health and so on, and they've gone. And so actually, I remember being sat on my sofa with my wife just going, I just feels like ever decreasing circles. Remember, there's a soap opera called Ever Decreasing, and I need to make friends, but actually it's quite hard. If you try and. I just love for you to just open up about friendship, which you're talking about easily. So it'd be interesting to how three middle-aged guys made friends, and the second one is about, and the two I think are interlinked, about your own mental health, because we talk about it, with regards to our children. And I think, the stigma of mental ill health amongst children is beginning to lift. But amongst, us, our generation, I'm not too sure it is. And, just if you wanted to talk about that, particularly really focusing on what helps you through it, what helps you through those moments. You've touched on a couple of things there, but it'd be lovely to do that. Friendship, mental health.
Who says we're friends?
The fact that you can say that, that's only friends that cruel.
I see it more as the Three Stooges, really.
All right, okay, let's skip on from the friendship.
We'll try that.
Yeah, I think the friendship thing started. Obviously, Mike and I were thrown together, which was really unusual by our kids. It was our kids that were instrumental in
interesting.
And then all of a sudden we've got this connection, and two blokes have spoken to each other very candidly about really suffering in a very, very dark place, the darkest place you can imagine. And we both, that forms a bond between two people. And then, and Andy comes along, and we don't all meet. The first time we collectively meet was May last year. So Mike and I have been talking to each other for over a year, and then Andy had come along after being introduced, through Gregor. And the first time we met, and that was virtually met face to face like we're doing that now. I think it was the 24th or 26th of May last year, and kind of we instantly hit it off, and we arranged to go up to Mike's house at the beginning of July to do some of the planning. And it really was three blokes really comfortable with each other, very open with each other. There was no kind of pretense about. There was no false. It was just you've got us whether you like it or not. You get what you see. There's no pretense. There was a few beers drank on the first night, but honestly, it was just three blokes who are had been in the worst situation, that were trying to kind of support each other and get support out of it themselves from this friendship. And it was, we have laughed a lot, we've cried a lot together. And I think the key thing is none of the three of us are scared to show each other any of our emotions. If we are feeling bad, we're feeling bad, and that's what you get. So the friendship was there very quickly. And like you say, I was never expecting to meet these two guys. I wish I hadn't met these two guys. I hadn't met them. No, because the cause of why we met. But now you can't go back. You can't change anything in the past. So all you can do is look forward and be positive. And both of them, they're both trying to get something positive out of the most dire situation. So we're all trying to go in the same direction.
Yeah, I think
that. Oh, go on, Mike. Go on.
No, I was just going to say, we are all very different. The girls were all very different. We are very different ourselves. But I think that is, that's part of why we probably gel, because we are different. We found that on the walk. Since we have our different characteristics and ways. That the friendship gelled as we walked along, because we did feel comfortable with each other, and we did laugh, and it's carried on very much after the walk as well. Unfortunately, I speak to these guys every other day, and get an email or a text every day, so yeah.
We managed to share a beer yesterday, though, didn't we?
We actually shared two, if you remember.
I didn't. I was a million miles away.
We sent you a photo, though, didn't we?
Thank you. Yeah.
I think the fact that because of the background the way we'd met, we were all being very open about our feelings to all kinds of people. When we actually came together, we were just completely open. Like these two were saying about the conversations that they had. There was absolutely nothing to hide. There was no reason to hide anything. And it's very unusual, certainly for men, to have that kind of conversation. But because of the way we'd landed together, it actually felt very natural. And because I think all three of us weren't frightened to share with others how we felt, we kind of ended up down this route. It was we had lots of challenging conversations and a lot of very painful things, but we also, because we opened up, it made it easy to be friends.
So I want to ask two different questions, and they're very different questions. Someone's maybe going through something similar to this now. What would what are the three things you'd say to them? Might be one, might be four, but what would you say to them? And the other one is, I guess, really around, because you've all been talking about, you'd never have wished for it, obviously, in a million years, but in the circumstance, this is what I've learned. Could you maybe open up on that a bit? Like you talk about life and how you drop the pretenses and all this sort of stuff. That'd be really interesting. So the first question is about, maybe Mike, if you want to lead, what is it, what got you through that 6 months? What did you learn from that? What would you say to another dad experiencing something? And then maybe, open floor, what is it? What have you taken away from this that's good?
As we've said, you're plunged into a surreal world of complex grief, and that's what it is. It is absolutely brutal. There is nothing else you can say. You see suffering all around you. You see your family suffering. You know, the person who's left, the person who's taken their own life, their pain doesn't disappear. It's handed to those they love, their family, their friends. It's handed on. It's absolutely brutal. You know, if you're talking from a father's point of view, you know, that's, if you are a proud father, that is just taken from you. You feel absolutely helpless. You feel as though you've absolutely failed. Absolutely. You know, you try your best, as I said, to protect your children, and you failed. But you still have people around you that love you and depend on you. Now, that is realizing that is probably the first stage of moving with it, or carrying on.
Yeah.
But then you must reach out to any support mechanism you can. And as we discussed already, my support mechanisms were basically Tim. They were the doctor, very much the doctor. Friends and family rallied round, but a lot of them, you got to remember, absolutely devastated by it as well. You know, so you are looking for some kind of positive, and it is so hard. You know, I go back to my little dog, but that was one of the reasons why I had to get out of bed, because I did not want to get out of bed. You know, I walked in about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. I saw no one, but I had to get out. So it's looking for those support mechanisms. There are people to talk to out there. Unfortunately, the National Health Service and my doctor's been very good, and I got counselling very early on because I think they recognised that I was at risk myself. But you must look at organisations such as Papyrus as well that will try and guide you. We also have in Manchester the Greater Manchester Suicide Information Service as well, and they were excellent, but they aren't well known. The doctor didn't even know this service existed. You know, but what would I say to someone in the same situation? You have to reach out, and maybe you need to talk to someone who has gone through it themselves.
Yeah. Andy?
Yeah. The critical thing that I think we've all been through ourselves, and certainly we've found when we were on the war, was you've got to be able to talk to people, because it's communication that allows you to not escape from the grief, because grief never leaves you, but it allows you to start to manage it and make it more what's the right word? So you can actually live with it. To start with, you're overwhelmed and you're crushed, and that's all your mind is full of. But as you go on, you've got to be able to talk to people and truly explain how you're feeling. And we've come across people who'd lost loved ones, sometimes decades ago, who had not been able to talk to anybody about how they felt. And you can see they've carried this excruciating pain around with them for years and years and years. Whereas if you can actually just allow some of it out, the people we talked to, we saw people who came and talked to us whilst we were walking. When they first met us, you could see they were just kind of desperate to let something out. But by the time they'd walked with us and talked with us for quite a while, it was quite odd. You know, when we started out walking, we wondered whether we would end up loaded with other people's grief. But actually what we were finding was you could see people letting these emotions out, and they became lighter just as they went along. And it wasn't that we were taking it off them, but their process of talking was being so helpful to the folk who actually were able to talk. Whereas the ones who couldn't talk or hadn't been able to talk with them and carted this pain around with them for years. So talking is the key.
We manage therapists, and at the end of the day, therapist in a room with a child, at the end of the day, what they do is, for me, the outcome is bordering on brain surgery. But the process is to allow a child to talk, because obviously, as we talk, we begin to process what emotions that may be just a dark dread inside us, so that we don't quite know what it is. And as you begin to name it, you begin to crystallize it, and then you know what it is. So I agree. Just being able to share, it's just huge. I mean, that's that theme of friendship just coming out there again. But even sometimes, even if it's friendship on the road, as my old Irish gran used to say, friendship on the road. You're there. It's intimate for a while. You care for each other, love each other in that moment, and then move on. Tim, did you have anything? Like just on that second point, did you have anything? If that actually you've taken from this and said, oh, okay, now I'm going to change this. I'm not talking about parenting and that sort of stuff. I'm talking about as an individual, as a bloke. Is there stuff that you've taken from this?
Yeah, like the other two, it's the talking thing. I've been through professionally some pretty bad stuff. I'm in the military. I've had mid-air collisions. I've been to war. I've been through some pretty bad stuff, and you're trained to cope with that. But when Em took her own life, I knew I wasn't trained to cope with that. And I knew that the only thing I could do was talk to people. And the only way of talking to people was to find some people. So as both the others alluded to, that anyone that offered a hand, a friendship or professionally, I would bite it off and I would go and talk to them, whether it be a charity, whether it be, chaplains or, the local vicar or friends or acquaintances that you don't know very well, but suddenly they come to the fore. I would talk to absolutely anyone. And because I knew this thing that I was trying to cope with was bigger than I could cope with. If I hadn't spoken to anyone, I'd have been in a real mess. And that's probably a different state to how I was 10 years ago. I'd have tried to compartmentalize it and deal with it on my own. But when you're faced with something like this, it just felt, I need help. I know I need help. And that wasn't, I haven't had any counselling at all. Not because I didn't want it, it just never kind of plopped itself. And with the coronavirus and all the restrictions, a lot of that was disappearing off and was all being done via Zoom or Teams or something. But I found a lot of counsel in, people like Andy and Mike, and just meeting up with them and being able to speak quite openly about how you're feeling. So that's the biggest thing I've learned, is to talk, as the other two have said. And that's the essence of everything. Talk to people, and that human interaction, you'll get something out of it.
I was once there was a longitudinal, I can't pronounce the word, but a multi-generational
longitudinal. Yeah.
Thank you for just humiliating me by pronouncing it.
Easy for you to say.
Not really. Anyway, this survey is like 50,000 children, and done over sort of 30 years, about the best parenting strategies and everything like that. And the scientists all gathered all the data, and they crystallize it into the best. And it's really funny. This guy, the lead psychologist on the peer-reviewed work, said something along the lines of, with all the data and all the scientific research, with everything that we now know as a result of having proved it systemically over the last 20 or 30 years, what we found out is what our grandmothers knew. It's good to talk.
Yeah.
It's just funny, same old, but we learn it hard, don't we? Gosh.
Well, going take a step back to the suicides of our girls and suicides of others. The one, and then so many people we've spoken to along the way that we've been on. The one thing that screams out of these people who took their own lives, at some point they just stopped being able to ask for help.
Yeah.
Or didn't ask for their help in the first place, or tried to sort out whatever problems they had, whether it was a mental health issue or problems in their lives. They just didn't stop and go, does anybody help me? And that's that. With our three girls, if they'd asked us for help, we would have done it. We just done it because that's what dads do. Yeah. But anybody would have been in the same boat. Think how many people we spoke to on that walk who, the loved ones were gone out of the blue, didn't see it coming, and they'd just not gone, I'm not feeling good, And that's the one thing that the message that we're trying to get out is, it's all well and good talking about how to pick yourself up after suicide, but we're more interested in trying to get people talking
Yeah.
before the event, and that's the heart of what Three Dads Walking was and still is and will be.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, the point is that we know we can't save everyone, but we know so many just by talking, making people aware, teaching people how to reach out will save lives. You know, because what we all know, what we're living life, you have rough patches, but you all know that after those rough patches, you can have some, times get better. That's part of life. But to lose hope, I mean, especially with our girls so young and them not being able to see, further down the road, it's very hard, but talking's a great thing.
It is. I think I just want to, because you guys have picked up on stuff like blame and so on. And this has been the last 10 years, has been it's different. Every generation says my childhood was harder. This, I had a tough background. That's my background. I don't want to go into that now. A tough upbringing. Nothing compared to the average child. What they've been experiencing for the last 10, 15 years with the rise of social media and so on. And, lockdown is, it's just unprecedented. Literally, the war didn't impact children as much as lockdown did, And I just, just want to reach out and just say, to you, but also to other dads, we do our best. No one's perfect. Everybody drops the ball. And I'm a dad and I drop the ball. But, to recognize also that it's a tough world for kids right now, and, it's not all within our control. It's not. And I think if we do communicate with each other, with our children, encourage them to talk to their friends, and then I think, we're doing the best that we can. And the rest of it, well, that's up to God. There's not much more we can do.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's an interesting point, isn't it? Not going too much into it, but faith as well. I found I didn't really have a faith before I lost Beth, but one of my great supporters was basically a chaplain, Chaplain George, and he helped me immensely just by listening. But you start venting at God, and why, so it's just an interesting point.
I could write the book, but I'm sure you all could. It is a huge question, but in personally, that's a journey I've taken very personally, and in the job that I do and the suffering that I see, it brings great meaning and purpose, and how that impacts me is to say, well, can we stop other children suffering? Can we stop other, that's the driver that comes out of that for me. Okay, I get this was difficult for me, but can that change something in me, and that's where that journey took me, very personally. And what do you talk about when you're walking?
Not
and his feet.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to posit a theory, and I just want to know if you agree with the theory. So I don't know when. I can't actually put a date or an age on it, but somebody just said not football. I can't talk about football anymore. Like if I really don't know someone and I have to talk, and I try and gather up something I read somewhere about. But it just seems so lightweight. I'm like, really? We're going to talk about that striker? And I don't know. So I need to talk about stuff now. What do you talk about?
Andy wants to talk about football.
I do want to talk about football.
We don't. No. We ignored him when he was talking about football.
Are you putting us off here, Tim?
Pardon? No, I'm trying to get rid of the phone call.
Yeah, it was important.
Was it the Prime Minister?
No, the daughter, I think, at school. I might have to go.
Right.
Well, we'll wrap up in a few minutes, but just very, what do you talk about?
Well, I did want to talk about football because I'm a Man City supporter, and Mike, though he tries to deny
your time has come.
Is a Man United supporter. Yeah, I've lived through pain and hardship. I had a season ticket when I lived in Manchester and stood on the terraces at Main Road in the Kippax, and it was just awful. So I'm making the most of being a Man City supporter, and it does feel like a revelation. So so I did try and engage Mike in conversation occasionally, but he didn't seem to want to do it. Although he did make us go to Old Trafford, which was against my better nature.
Yes, yeah.
But that turned out to be a highlight, didn't it?
Yeah. That you got Andy to go into Old Trafford. We were
into the den of the beast. Go on.
He went in. Yes, we were. Yeah, we on the walk. We visited Old Trafford. We met Lou Macari. You might remember, but Lou'd lost his son in 1999, and what a wonderful, warm human being. Yeah, great visit.
Yeah, but in
Right,
terms
so
of what we talked about, we talked about everything.
Your feet, as Tim said,
feet with a lot. Yeah,
that's a big subject.
It was,
and getting lost. Lost.
Yeah.
The internal workings of Tim's bowels actually was quite high priority for a while.
or the lack of working of Tim's bowels.
Yes, it was okay after day 4. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's out there. That is real.
No, you can't say get it out there. You can't say.
We rarely walked alone, funnily enough. Obviously, we did talk, at night time and things, but only briefly because we were so knackered.
Yeah.
But we rarely walked alone on the walk. It was always people with us. And those people tended to come with their own stories and go around each one of us and talk to us. So, obviously we did talk, but often it was, usually was with other people.
We found out a lot about all kinds of folk, didn't we? Not all about suicide and loss, but people were just very. I think because we had been seen to be open, talking about something fairly painful, very painful. People just came and talked to us about all kinds of stuff and shared.
Lots of people joined us, weren't there, that told us about, so and so lived in this house, and famous people, and it was incredible, absolutely incredible.
Tim, before we go, any final thoughts?
No, I think the big takeaway from me with all this lot is just be open, just talk to someone, find anyone that you can talk to, and if that's not working, then move on to somebody else. But be open and talk, because that is definitely what drew us all together, but it's also got us through. And it was the big thing, the big takeaway from the walk was people just talking to us. It's not complicated, just talk.
Yep, agree.
Gentlemen, it's been an honour to meet you all. Thank you so much, Mike, Andy, Tim. Actually, Vegans are running a course right now with Papyrus. So if you're interested in running that, then please do have a look at that. And as part of Dadinfo, you may be aware, but there's a counsellor that you can ask just simple questions on if you want, or actually book in actual sessions if you want to do that as well. We run that out of Dadinfo. So if these issues have impacted you as a dad, there is help and there is hope. And just go and talk to someone. Thank you very much, all of you. And I wish you the very best for the coming months and years. You take care.
Thanks, Ian. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.